Good morning. Welcome to our May XMod Pro user group meeting. Hopefully everybody can hear me fine. I'm not hearing any sound. Okay. Today we're going to have a couple speakers. We had announced the other day 3, but we have 2, which is so great because that's going to give us a full hour of talking today. I just wanted to remind you that if you'd like to participate in the talk, there's a link on our Google Plus Hangouts page for the May meeting, and if you click on that, then you can participate. And I see Keith has already clicked on that. As long as you mute your microphone, that would be helpful to us so we don't have people talking over each other. And when you have a question, you can click on the blue Q&A button that's on the left side of your screen if you hover over the video. And for those of you just viewing on our Hangouts page, you should see a blue Q&A button. If you click on that, enter your question. We'll try to keep on top of it during everybody's presentations, and they'll answer your questions either during the talk or after. We'll have 2 speakers today, and I'd like to start off having Kelly Ford, president of DNNDev and creator of XMod Pro, talk to you for a few minutes. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Kelly?
Thanks, Melinda. Welcome to the May user group for XMod Pro. This is a regular thing we do every month, and it happens on the 4th Thursday of every month if you want to kind of pencil us into your schedule. We've got 2 great speakers today. One you probably haven't heard from, and that is Stephen Lauer. He'll be in the second half of our session, and he's going to be talking about some really interesting things dealing with using XMod Pro forms to post and get values, and we'll be integrating with some feeds. And he's got really a multi-part session, so it's packed with a lot of stuff, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. But we're going to start out with something that is near and dear to all of our hearts. As you know, that XMod Pro isn't just a module. It's more of a development environment, a programming tool. It is something you use to build and to customize solutions for clients and yourself. And with every development tool, there comes the issue of how do you know when things go wrong and what do you do about it? And so Ryan, who has had an awful lot of experience, years of experience working with XMod Pro and developing sites for different clients, he's up now to talk to us a bit about debugging and XMod Pro. Ryan, take it away. You need to unmute your mic.
Yep.
There we go.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Kelly. Good introduction to the idea for this session. I think perhaps like Stephen's session, this might turn into something that I could put into 2 or 3 different spots as we focus on different sides of things, and I'll kind of introduce the idea of what I wanted to do in this, and then we're going to jump in and take a look. One of the things I wanted to do is make this entertaining, make this a little bit fun to go through, because errors and troubleshooting and debugging is already not fun enough. So to sit and listen to someone talk about it is automatically going to be less fun. But try to have a little bit of fun with this. My intent is to take this presentation, which uses a tool called Prezi that you'll see in just a moment, but then to take all the same materials and to put them out into a series of articles that I'll put out in my blog on the DNNDev website. And I think there's a natural grouping of these errors and troubleshooting tips and things that I have to roll out, and I can see it turning into a few different issues or articles naturally broken out. So what we're going to get into today is a little bit of what I've done to document the different kinds of errors that you can see when you're working with XMod Pro. And it does not matter if you are a first or second time person working with inside of XMod Pro code, or you've been working with it for 6 years. These are all error messages that in one way or another are things that you will run across, and it doesn't matter how well you know your code or what you're doing, you're going to trip across one or multiples of these. And as you get experience, the more you know what these error messages look like, the faster it is for you to find exactly where the problem is. So myself, with my crew and having new people come on the crew, it's the type of thing where I've taught this a few different times in a row, and I thought this would be a great way to put it together into a presentation that anyone can look through. So this session will talk about error messages and what you see and where they come from and guesses to get you looking in the right direction. Another session in the future can be some troubleshooting methods to help you not bang your head against the desk for an hour and instead get it down to 2 minutes. Then, so that I don't forget, as we go a little bit further in, I want to open it up to everybody who's listening and participating now to help me find any of the error messages that I've forgotten, find any of the error messages that I haven't put into the presentation yet. I've had some of my crew saving snapshots and sending them to me, letting me take a look at the code that they had that produced this, so that I can add it into the presentation. And what I'd love to see as these blog posts go up is, if you run across an error message that you haven't seen before, or you found a particularly fun one that you wanted to share, pass it my way. I'll put it in, and we will try and help make a little, if not knowledge base, a little fun location that we can all go to help make our troubleshooting that much faster. So without further delay, let me switch share screens. If you would, Kelly, just let me know in a couple seconds to make sure that rather than multiple monitors here, that I'm sharing my main screen, which then is going to have this Prezi presentation on it.
Yep, looks like you're good.
All right. Okay, so
before you start real quick, I just wanted to remind everybody that if you have any questions, go ahead and post them in the Q&A and or raise your hand. We'll see you on the screen, and we'll try to stop Ryan and ask him those questions, or you can ask him those questions if you're joining us live.
Absolutely, please do, because with the switch of the screen that I'm doing now, I don't have the questions or comments up on screen so that I can see them at the same time. So please pipe up, Melinda or Kelly, anybody, make me pause if there's a good question for me to jump into. So this is the presentation. I'm going to kind of jump in and start running through these items. Prezi is a kind of unique presentation system, as you'll see in a few moments, and one of the things that you do in Prezi is you organize data that you want to present by topical groups. So as we get into this, you're going to see that to begin with, we are talking about error messages, things that you will see, responses, and what the effects and the downsides are to those effects as we go through them. But they're grouped into 3 different groups. And a warning, as I mentioned here in this bottom of the slide here, we have memes ahead. So here we go. XMod Pro, you're working in code. This, like I was saying, is your first time into code. This is your 1700th time into code. You load up a page and you get a yellow error message up at the top of the page. And now you need to see what to do next to figure out what has happened and why has this happened. If you're like me, many of us, the first thing that we do when we see that big error message is a facepalm. We decide that we are tired, we need a break for a second, and what did I do wrong that now has an error message showing up on screen? So let's talk a little bit about these errors and what happens and what they look like. You're going to see several of these error messages throughout the presentation. If you've spent any time with XMod Pro, perhaps you've seen some of these before. The thing to start off with is to describe, and you probably know this already, is that stack trace and that information that you get in the error message may or may not be useful to you. It depends on the level of developer that you are and what you're used to reading and looking through. Whether you might be able to grab a couple of kernels of useful information out of there, but many times there's not that much useful information. It's not as though it's telling you on line 22 there's a problem with XYZ, but sometimes it does. So through this presentation and the series of things that I'm going to put together, I will hopefully show you that with a simple process of troubleshooting techniques and knowing a little bit more about these different error messages, they can help you quickly find and fix the issue by knowing what to look for. So with this yellow error message that we have on the right, I kind of zoom in to give a description of a couple of these different error messages. So, for instance, here on the top of the screen, I have an example of a stack trace that is useful. It might not tell you exactly what's going on, but it's giving you some clues that you just need to learn how to read. So in this particular one, we're seeing a message that says a procedure or function, and it names that function, and then it gives the stack trace. But the stack trace alone shows you that you've got words like data source, SQL data source, record count. In the stack trace, these are things that are telling you that what you've got on hand is most likely a SQL issue with your query, with your stored procedure, with what you are doing or telling to it. And so rather than spending time on anything else in the template, SQL is the first place for you to go take a look. Other times there are phrases that can help tell you that there is something wrong and it's in your code in the template versus bothering to look with the SQL. So a phrase such as template compilation error is very, very specific, and it's even telling you this template does not have a public property named this doesn't exist. So if I invent a tag and I call it this doesn't exist, or I thought I was putting in a token but I made it a tag or something strange, XMod Pro might bark about it, and it's going to do its best to give you some information. And so in this pair of examples here, one would send me looking for SQL to find what might be going on. The other one would have me looking at my my code, my .NET code, my tags. What if I put together? Where is something that says this doesn't exist? Let me take a look at it. So I mentioned that it often helps to know several common scenarios. So in this presentation, we're going to go through 3 groups of where errors can occur. And I'm not sure I'll get through all 3 groups in today's session. I kind of have an expectation that I will get through SQL errors, and I will get into template and form errors, but then I'll probably have to stop in the middle of that and then pick it up in another session to talk about module and DNN errors, and then do troubleshooting techniques. So this is another point for me to mention again. I'm sure that in the errors that I'm showing on screen, these are my favorites. They're the ones that come up often enough that I could think of them off the top of my head. But if you have errors that you see that I didn't mention, I'd love for you to email me, message me on the DNNDev website, post comments in the blog when I get it up there, so that you can let me know other errors that you think we need to add into this list. So let's jump right into the first category. And you have SQL data errors. My favorite, the most common one that you're going to run across, I think, is the one that says something to the effect of given key not present in the dictionary. What does that mean? Why is it there? What does it mean? What is it telling you? In most cases, errors that you're going to run into that are SQL related are either in the record set or what you are doing with that data after it's out of the record set. And depending on the type of error that's at hand, you might have a partially rendered template that you can use to look at, or it may have stopped altogether and created a scenario where you can't do a thing but load up some other page and get it to the control panel. So let's jump into some of those scenarios and talk about it. I'll start off with one that's a pretty easy one. I don't even know if I'd call this an error. This is just straightforward. With the ease of using the automated template builder, so that you grab a database table, you grab the fields, and you go ahead and select those. I'm not sure how many people might see this message as much anymore these days, but it's one that I used to see commonly. And it is what shows up when you have a starter XMod Pro template that doesn't have any data whatsoever inside of it, and it is the blank starter. So if you run across that and you spend more than a couple of seconds troubleshooting it, then you need to bone up and study these things so that you'll know how to get through that one very quickly. The scenario there is that I have a template that is a brand new starter blank template that XMod Pro would generate for you, and I pressed save, loaded it up, and I kept on moving. And so in this case, list data source is blank. So of course it's going to give you a message that says that there is a missing list command. As it is. There is no list command there. So let's get into some real ones. And this is probably our very first and major critical one that I can hear it across the office when guys run across these ones, because they'll groan and they'll think, oh, what field did I not have that I think I have? So the problem here is the message that says the given key was not present in the dictionary. You're running across this one. I think we need to take our standard facepalm and we up it one notch, and this is double facepalm worthy. The problem here is that you are referencing a data value, a token, somewhere in your template that is not present in the result set of what you are querying out of SQL. So this means that it is either named differently than you think it's named, or you have a select statement that is very specifically grabbing 3 fields, and this is a 4th field. But in any case, you can quickly run through and troubleshoot this by grabbing all of the tokens, and sometimes you can take a look at the template that has rendered on the screen and see the point at which it stopped on the screen and say, okay, it stopped right here. That's the last token I saw render out. What's the next one in the list? So sometimes there's a visual cue that you can find either visually or with view source. But one very quick way to go through this is to start near the bottom of your set of fields and start clearing things out of your template. And delete the bottom half of your template. Run it. Does it work fine? Great. Then you know that your problem was in the bottom half. Does it still have a problem? Then you have a problem in the top half. I'll talk about some of those methodologies that I run through for rapid troubleshooting and testing that I call the artillery method, where you quickly divide the page into chunks to find where is the problem so that you don't spend time even reading it. You are chopping it into fourths so that you find out where that particular problem is. But so this one being the most common error that we often see is again SQL related, in that your SQL query that you are running just doesn't have that field present that you are requesting. So another very common one can happen when you are copying and pasting and moving things around and you don't think about what you've just done, but essentially a data token is in the wrong place. You take a look at this, and the message is going to be something to the effect that the object variable or width block variable is not set. What this is literally telling you is that you have referenced a data token, something that is coming out of the SQL query, but it is not present. You are calling it in the wrong place. So in this example piece of code, you can see that I'm calling a token. This isn't one of the ever-present user ID or portal ID or any of those other types of tokens that can go in many different places. This is a data token for row number. I certainly have row number over here inside of my item template, but it looks like I have placed row number in my header template. It's not present in the header template. SQL is running the header runs, and then the SQL comes in play when you get into the looping of the item template. So it is not present here at this point. So SQL data tokens can only go in the item template, and that's the problem here, and that's what we're seeing as the message. The next one is also a favorite. Basically, the SQL query is having a problem that you have called a variable or created a variable that you're passing into SQL, but you haven't finished it up all the way. So the message might say, must declare scalar value variable show hidden. So in my particular stored procedure here, oh yes, implied facepalm is our result for that one. You've got a stored procedure. We're passing some variables into it that can certainly be in a standard SQL query. But if you take a look, in my list data source, I have parameters set up for what I've named past user ID and past portal ID. I have past portal ID called. It's not complaining about that. Show hidden, though, and all the rest of the ones here, oh, I've forgotten to finish setting up the parameters, or I deleted them by accident. That's why it's giving me this message that I've got to declare the value that it does not know what to do with show hidden or show admin or show parent, because XMod Pro isn't passing in and replacing any data or any values there for it. So it's going to bark. It can be because they're completely missing. It can be because of spelling or typo type errors. I have a few more SQL items that are kind of less high priority, and I have some good ones that do really well. So let me hit those for just a couple seconds, and I'll move on to templates, as I have about maybe 10 more minutes to run through in this. So another favorite error can be just a very simple error in your SQL query. If you have problems with commas in your query, you might see something like incorrect syntax near from. This is a good example of one where there is an error message. You're seeing that it mentions data source. It's mentioning SQL data source, so you know that this is going to be a SQL related error, but it's giving you a really good bit of information here. Incorrect syntax near from. You know that this is somehow going to be related to your SQL query. And in this particular case, if you look closely, I've got select user ID and first name from users. Whoa, I forgot a comma here at the end. Either I deleted another field that I was grabbing, or I just forgot and left a comma in there. Of course, that extra comma is going to make SQL freak out, and XMod Pro is giving you that that message. And so this is my point to say that some SQL error messages are very helpful, and they give you a pretty good idea of where to go look. Check for commas. Test the query in the SQL window. If you can test the query in the SQL window, then you can get to the point where at least you'll see it run successfully and probably be able to move on to whatever else is next. So there are some SQL error messages that are perfectly helpful. I would say this is a scenario where it's giving us back the best possible message. So in this particular example, I'm not sure whether I need to zoom in all the way. I think you can see it. I've got a stored procedure I am calling, and at the moment I am passing in 1, 2, 3, 4 variables into this stored procedure, and it is telling me procedure or function. It gives me the name of the stored procedure, is expecting a parameter of portal ID, and it was not supplied. That's telling me that that stored procedure is expecting a few more parameters to be passed in, and I'm not passing these parameters in. So sometimes there are perfectly helpful SQL error messages, and in those particular cases, we give SQL and ASP.NET a good golf clap, because it is giving us back a worthwhile message that then Kelly is able to display to the screen and get back out there for all of us to read into. So kind of leaving the world of SQL messages and SQL errors. As I get more of these, I'll continue to add them around the circle and continue that group. But for the presentation, we're going to move over now to code errors. Sometimes these are the most troublesome, time-consuming, pain-in-the-neck errors to have to go through, and they're the ones that take the most time. So I will definitely spend more time in troubleshooting tips in sections of this this particular area. You have a pretty good case that if you see any of these kinds of error messages, you know that the problem is more than likely in your code. So let's take a look at some of the first of these. I'm going to start with the biggest one that really will cause a problem and ruin an afternoon. And one way or another, whichever way you accidentally do it, if you paste a form into a template or you paste a template into a form, in either case, you've got a complete mess on your hands. Because unless you're keeping regular backups of all of your templates and forms and files regularly, you've got a scenario now where, sure, you can find the right place to paste this code back into, but you have now completely ruined and gotten rid of some code that you were meaning to present, either the template or the form that got butchered now by having the wrong code put into it. So this scenario, for me at least, goes like this. I've got the quick access to be able to click on the form right here in the bottom left, or I can click on the template. If I'm copying and pasting and going quickly, if I click on the wrong one and press paste and then press save, it will blow up and I will see this error message before I have any chance to do anything about it. So in this particular case, what I'm looking at first is what happens when you put a form and form code into what is expecting a template. It will tell you data binding methods such as xval, xpath, and bind can only be used in the context of a data bound control. I see that error message and I instantly know I have just messed up a perfectly good template by dropping in and overriding some form code on top of it. And I know I have now blown up this template and I've got to fix two problems. My form I was originally working on, and now I've got to go hope that I can find information for my template. Same thing works in reverse when you accidentally put a template in a form. So that shows a slightly different message because it gives you a form compilation error. And it will tell you the form view does not have a public property named template. Oh no, that means I've accidentally pasted a template into the add form or edit form of my pop-up window, my easy edit window, and I am in pretty sorry shape at that point. In later sessions, I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we've talked about internally to try and help minimize the number of times that we do that in websites that we're working on. So the final two that I have here are two others that I liken them to nuclear blasts here. These are really bad errors in a template. They're easy to recover from. You can fix them up. It's not that bad a problem. But it's a bad problem that once it's in place, XMod Pro can't work correctly to show you the little gray control bar with the quick edit for the form or the template. So once you blow up the code in this one of these two methods, then you do not have the control on that module any longer, and the only way for you to correct your problem is to go to another page with another XMod Pro instance, or if you can get to it here, go to the control panel and load up that form or template to fix and correct the issue that occurred. So let's take a look at this one a little bit closer. Oops, I don't have a zoom on it. Okay, I'll zoom manually. So essentially, in this particular situation, inside of a template, I'm getting a template compilation error, and it says that the template does not have a property named parameter. So let's go take a look at why that is occurring. If we look at our template code, I have a pretty good select statement going on here. My SQL looks pretty good. I don't think I've got any problems. Let's see, I've got my parameters. Gosh, I don't know, this looks pretty good. Oh, wait, this happens to me all the time. I started off with a self-closing list data source because I had a simple query, but then as I made it more complex, I decided to pass some variables to it. So I added some parameters and I closed off the list data source. Hold on, I forgot to remove the self-closing slash. Of course it's going to have a problem because, as far as .NET is concerned, it ran through, it found list data source. Hold on, what is a parameter tag? It doesn't know what to do. XMod Pro doesn't know what to do with a parameter tag unless it's inside of a list data source, but I've already closed my list data source. So what it is telling me is that it doesn't know what to do with a property named parameter, and that's because I've mistakenly closed something that needs to remain open. So that is a self-contained bomb because we are blowing up inside of this pair or set of lines right here. The next one is the opposite of the same issue or problem. We are missing a closing tag. This one you could have the sound effect for because it's pretty devastating when that happens. The page won't let you do anything more with that code right there because it's giving you this message that says unexpected end of file looking for tag. It tells you it's a template compilation error, so you know it's involved your template code. And what we are missing is the closing of some tag. You might have multiple tags, but you know at least one of them isn't closed. And so what's happening is the process is going through. It finds the opening of tags, it finds the closing of tags, it finds the opening of a tag, and it keeps going through all the rest of the code until it reaches the end of all the code, looking for what it knows should be coming, which was the closing of, in this particular case, a missing XMod select closing tag. It doesn't find one. The rest of your code might be perfectly fine. It's going to give you a message there that tells you unexpected end of file looking for tag. That's actually a pretty verbose message. It tells you exactly what it's doing. I'm sorry, I got tired. I got to the end of the file and I didn't find what I was looking for. Can you help me, please? So as far as code errors are concerned, this is kind of the end of what I consider to be the universal errors, because these types of things can happen in either templates or in forms or in feeds, although feeds would give you a little bit of different of a presentation of it. Oh, sorry, one more, and then I'm done. Bad tag or parameter. If you've got a typo in place, you're not going to get a lot of information outside of something that tells you it doesn't have a public property with that name or something. It will give you a little bit of that name, but in this particular case, this is one that happens to me often enough. If I'm going quickly and working on some things, in this particular example, in a parameter for a list data source, I just put in that the value was user ID and the default was 1138, and oh, of course that's going to throw a problem. Default isn't the name of that particular variable. It is default value, not just default. So it's telling me it doesn't know what the property named default is. So it does give you something to search by, but it's a pretty I don't know, a pretty silly error to have, pretty quick to find and stomp out. So that is kind of the end of the general section of things. What you'll see if you take a look in the Prezi, because I will post the link to this, I have several more outlined for template-specific errors, like the fact that you can't nest a template inside a template, but you can nest a feed inside a template. I have the breakdown then for template-based errors or form-based errors. Form-based errors might be examples of a template that's not passing a value to a form, so the form can't save correctly. But then later I will finish up and put in some more, such as the module and DNN-specific errors. In these cases, you probably didn't do anything wrong, but there's still an error having a problem somewhere. So these are things such as by FTP, an XMod Pro file has been renamed and therefore it's not linked anymore. Maybe you have bad code in the module variables. Maybe jQuery is giving you a conflict, so the XMod Pro control panel is not working correctly. We'll run through all of those with more details, pictures, and face plants and face palms when I round out some more of the presentation. But for the moment, that is the end of the first session here with this Prezi. As I said earlier, I'll extend this out into blog posts with some articles that describe these and show them in a little bit more detail. But I can envision a second and a third session where we go through template and form errors, DNN and module errors, and then a second one where we go through troubleshooting tips and specific techniques. So at this point, I'm going to switch back over to the Google Hangout so I can see what's going on. I will pause or stop the screen share so that I can come back and see everyone. Melinda or Kelly, any questions from the viewers while I was going through?
If anybody who is participating has a question, feel free to unmute and ask Ryan directly.
All right. I extend that invitation again. Anybody that has errors that you've run across and you don't think that you saw that in any of those screenshots, they might be things that I already have on a list ahead of me, but they might not be. I'd love to start getting some feedback there to help make this a really expansive list of all the errors that you can see that you might run across.
Okay, that's quite a big endeavor there, Ryan, trying to document all of the possible errors that could occur when someone's doing some development. But you did hit most of the big ones I saw, and good explanations on how to kind of track it down and figure out what's going on. So we appreciate that.
Thank you. It was fun to intentionally break things and have those error messages come up instead of seeing them and dreading them.
Yeah. Well, really, if you find any bad ones, they're just features, really. They're not bugs. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so thank you, Ryan, and we'll just keep moving on. I'll remind you that if you have any questions on what the speaker is talking about while they're speaking, go ahead and ask something in the Q&A, and we'll be monitoring that, and we'll interrupt and give you a chance if you're participating to ask it live, or we'll just pass along the question if you don't want to talk live to us. So just keep that in mind. And next up, we've got, I'm surprised he's still awake because it is, what, 4:30-ish in Australia. Right. Stephen Lauer is a very dedicated XMod Pro user, a member of the user group, to stay up this late to do a presentation for us. So, Stephen, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Sure. Just a bit of... So I'm coming through okay, aren't I? You can hear me okay?
Yeah, as long as you're talking to your mic directly, we're good.
Yes, I'm talking relatively quietly because it's pretty early over here. So yeah, my background is basically implementation consultant for an enterprise vendor over here in Australia. A couple of years ago, my wife's organisation started a website, and I decided to use DNN to host or as the foundation for that website. And at that time, the DNN store was my friend because I'd buy all these modules to do what I needed to do, and basically had to try to jam it all together. One of the items I tripped over through the process was I found XMod Pro and used it particularly for a form I had in mind to do something. And once I started delving into it, found it could do just about anything. And so learning how to do those various bits and pieces, tripped over the user groups as well as stuff that's on DNNDev.com. And so I'm really grateful for the information that's on DNNDev.com, as well as very much with Patrick Ryan. Sorry he's not on the call today, but just with Discover XMod Pro. That's a tool and a resource I really highly recommend, and it's a really great resource, and it's still very much a growing document, but really appreciative of the stuff that Patrick's been doing through that process. And one of my own personal philosophies is really that if I get something from a community, I really want to contribute back to it. So hopefully, what I'm going to do today is go through a form, an initial form that I use, or at least a sample of it, use within my website using DNNDev to capture various bits and pieces. And what I'll do is I'll actually share the screen and show you what it looks like in its, there it is, that one there. Yep, so this is my page at the moment, or my testing one. So what I'm going to show you there is once I type in an email address, this particular one, it's already identified that it's come back with some as in that's the name that I put in when I first previously registered. But it's basically gone off and identified that email address saying that I've already communicated, so I don't need to capture the information anymore. Type in an amount to donate, and then submit details, which goes off to a payment processing, which I'll address next user group. Oops. If I go through and refresh that page, and type in a name or an email address that I haven't recognized before, it now exposes an area where we can capture some information from the person that's contacting a website, so that we can actually develop some contact records. The way that I do that, and it's actually, as you can see there, a growing form, is I actually have the form set up, and I'll just move across here so you can see it all, is I've actually got the form broken up into various sections, and in the most part, most of the sections have actually got the style of display none within the form itself. And then I use jQuery to actually expose various bits and pieces of it as I move along. So I'm not entirely sure whether I'm going to get through all of this during today, but one of the things I'm going to post up on the Google Plus Hangout page is actually this document here, which actually goes through all the various bits and pieces, including some sample code. So for example, so as I said, it's all in there. So in a few moments that will be posted up on the Google Plus page. So basically any of the code samples I've got there, I've actually included there. One of the things I have noticed previously as I've gone through some of these presentations is that I've spent a lot of time going over and over the presentations, looking at them in, like zooming them really right in so I can actually read the code that's on the screen. So I thought in this instance I'd actually share that code for the whole community to take, at least use it as a bit of a template. One of the caveats I do state in there is that I'm not a programmer. I'm somebody that's just using whatever tools I can get hold of to do stuff, and hopefully can get the information that people are looking for. So to start off my form, I actually have a header section within my form, and what I've actually set up in the background is I've actually got an administration page as I use the same form multiple times. So in this particular case, being the user group test, I've actually got a header that I've set up, and in there I've actually got a blurb that I've put in there using CK Editor, and that stores the data into a blob field in a database, so that when I go through and actually reference, so I've got a select command that actually looks up my module information and brings back my module header, which then shows that to me in my particular form. So that's the first section I've got there, which covers off that part of the form there. The next section that I go through is I've got some hidden details, which I actually reference reference around the place. So I've got the module ID, there's an item description which I use as part of the payment processing, there's a payment ID that gets saved, there's a return URL that gets saved, I've got a login type and a database ID. These fields actually get populated a little bit later down the process. But the next section I've got there is an email entry section, and this particular form's using Bootstrap, or particularly the Reflex skin that's provided as part of Discover XMod Pro. And through that process, I actually go through and have a div which is actually asking for the email address, and then I've got a return message on the screen. So that's how that particular part of the screen actually renders, which is that section in there. So it's got the @ symbol for the email address, and then the descriptor there to enter your email address so you can retrieve your details. Within the form, just minimize that, I've got a jQuery, I've got a script area within my form. Now I've got a couple of sections in there, but specifically I've got a section there that actually has where the email address is actually changed. And through that process, I determine what my email address is. I call a particular feed. Now I've set this up on my production website, so I've actually got a separate one for this testing site. That it goes through and actually calls the email address, returns a particular message that I've set up within my feed, or within a stored procedure behind that feed, and then ultimately I return back and populate into the fields on the screen, both the overt ones as well as the hidden ones, the various elements that I capture as part of my my feed. So if I go into there and type in my known SCL at mail. Let's see if I can type correctly. I've got there, hi, first name, last name. We have contacted you previously, and I can also use this functionality to determine whether they're a member of our website or not, determining whether they've got any special pricing. One of the things that we can actually do is by inspecting the element, we can actually go through and look in particularly the hidden areas. Some of the hidden values have actually come back and been populated. There's no payment ID. The return URL has been populated with the callback page. The fact that I've identified them as a user, it's got that there as a login type of view, and it's got should have, although I don't see it there particularly, but it already has in the background populated the fact that I've got a particular database ID for that particular contact. And good thing about Bootstrap, or particularly reflex template is that the reflex skin is that will actually reshape depending on the size of the form. So I'll just get rid of that, so I've loaded back full size. So if in the event I type in an address that isn't known, it will actually come back and populate or ask for various fields. Various things that I need. Now, one thing I won't be going through in here, that I'll talk probably at a different one, is I've actually got some jQuery happening so that if I type in a postcode or a zip code, for those of you in the States, it will come back and resolve the various suburbs that are connected to that particular zip code. So I'll address that in another user group meeting. But one of the things that I've actually set up is as soon as these particular fields have been modified or updated, particularly the state, it goes through and actually saves that record in the database. So next time I go in and actually use that email address, I've already captured that information in my database. And then type in my donation amount, and then it will actually then dynamically open up that submit details, because within my jQuery, I've got a section in there that goes through and on change of the donation amount. Where is it there? Yep, on change of donation, create my payment record and show the send button div that's within my form, and that send button is actually just a button to then post off to my next payment page. So as I said, most of the detail is hopefully detailed within my document I've got sitting in the background, and I'll post that up a little bit later, but hopefully there's enough there to at least get you started. And what I might do is just open up the floor for a few moments for a couple of questions. And what I'll do in the background is actually send off that that Google Doc, which is now up there on the screen. So just wondering if anyone has any questions on what I've shown you there so far.
Can you kind of run through, I noticed it was very quick when you entered in your postal code when it loaded up the regions or the suburbs or what have you.
Yep.
Are you using a feed for that?
Yes, I am using a feed for that, where I pass into the feed the postcode, and then it returns a HTML segment, which is basically dropping into my my drop-down list. So it does actually go through and validate the postcode, and then comes back with the various suburbs that are connected to that particular postcode or zip code.
Okay.
So again, I'll probably put something up on a little bit later on that one, or even address that at another user group meeting if you'll have me back.
Of course. No, that would be good. There's a lot of stuff in there I'd like to see you go into more depth on in future sessions. So now you said that the point of this particular form is really to gather payment information and send that off to a payment gateway. Is that correct?
Yes, certainly. The next page of that, and the next page of that does actually, and I will actually just give you a teaser for what I'll be going to probably next week. Once I go to the right page, is that now that I've identified $12, I go off to a submit details, goes through and okay, don't know what it's done there, but so it's actually gone through and populated the $12. Once I hit the big button, it's actually done a post off to an external payment processing website. So this is actually a test gateway, as you can see down the bottom of the screen. Enter a random expiry date, which is what all this site particularly needs. Continue, and this is actually sending a post, or will send a post back to my website. Basically confirming that we've received a message back from the bank saying that the payment has been completed. And from there I can actually send an email off to the customer, welcoming them to the team, and also as part of that process, if they're paying for a membership for the website, I can actually create their user ID within the DNN instance. So that's some of what I do as part of that form process. So I'll go through those last couple of bits probably next month, if the opportunity presents. So that way, then you can actually see the whole end-to-end cycle. And the key thing I wanted to talk about there is the ability to be able to post from your DNN instance, or particularly from XMod Pro, into a non-DNN website, and then potentially receive parameters coming back from that website into your DNN instance and actually do something useful with it.
So this this final page here, is that an XMod Pro template on there?
It certainly is. Actually, no, I think no, it's a form. This one.
Okay.
This particular one is a form.
But it's a standard .NET page with an XMod Pro form on it then?
It definitely is.
Okay. No, that's definitely something we'd like to see. So we're gonna drag you back, kicking and screaming at 4 in the morning to present next month.
Not a problem at all.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Well, we actually have a few minutes left. I know that Todd had asked a question of Ryan. I'm not sure if through the chat if Todd got the message. So his question is, how much help are the built-in browser tools in debugging XMod Pro?
That was a great question. I was playing around, not as familiar with the Google Hangout, so I wasn't sure where to write a chat back that he'd get. So really, really good question. One of the differences is that the errors, or the things that I was addressing there, are the ones that are XMod Pro and really .NET module level error messages. And those are the types of messages that are going to not be helpful for you to look at with the inspect element and with the different things you can do in IE. Aside from the fact that in a template, if you do have a token that's missing, it at least stops at a certain point so that you could see what point that was and make a guess at what was next. Otherwise, the inspect elements, your different tools in your browser are great for debugging, layout problems, just coding and rendering problems, HTML and jQuery kinds of issues. They're going to be invaluable. But many times the types of error messages that we went through in this don't have any extra information you would gain by using those tools.
Okay, good question, Todd. Are there
and
any...
one of the things,
Go ahead, Steve.
just to speak to that for just a second, one of the things I commonly use, particularly with using jQuery, is I tend to do a lot of console.log in my jQueries, so I can actually see what's being returned at various points in time, so that I know that I'm not too far off the reservation, and also that the console area particularly within Chrome, or probably some of the other browsers, also gives you an idea if you've really broken something insofar as your compilation of the jQuery as well.
Yeah, and you can discern some things that are server related. I mean, it's primarily designed for client-side stuff, but if you do have a problem, some of the errors that might be popping up that Ryan had showed us earlier, you'll be able to see in the network tab that most likely that's going to be returned as a 500 error or server error to you. It's probably not going to give you the kind of information that you really need to track things down, because those messages tend to be a bit even more opaque than what you can get back from ASP.NET. So it's there.
I agree that sometimes even amongst the crew, where I have one guy that's more focused on database, another guy that's focused on front end and jQuery, amongst them, they all generally know how to use those tools to help figure out, where there's a jQuery problem or where there's a script problem. But it's a little bit more mysterious how to look at a given key not present in the dictionary and know what did I do wrong and where is it? Everything looks good kind of problem.
Mm-hmm. One thing it could be helpful with is if your session is timed out, you might get a 401 or a 403 error, basically that you're not authenticated or you don't have permissions to that particular page. But other than that, that's about the most you can get, I think. It's great for client side, not so awesome for server side stuff. A lot of times, now this really applies only if you're writing some custom form controls or a custom server side tag for XMod Pro. But I will often just log out to the .NET Nuke exception handler just debug statements as I'm trying to work through something. So while they might be technically listed as errors and not really exceptions at all, it's just debug information, and it's a convenient place to put it. And I can do that kind of thing on a web server. I don't have to be working locally in order to get that information. So again, that's kind of a different area of debugging, but that also is helpful to do. Are there any other questions? Thanks, Todd, for that one. Okay, well, Ryan, will you join us again next month?
I would love to. I will be at the beach next month, so I will join you from a very warm, sunny balcony, and we'll be glad to both participate, and if you're ready to have me jump in with another session, do a little bit more in that presentation.
All right, sounds great. And Stephen, we definitely would like to have you back next month to get into some of the nitty-gritty details of some of what you've talked about for the second half of your session.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that'd be great.
All right, and I think we're going to try to find some way to squeeze Patrick back in next month too. He was sorry he had to miss this, but he had to attend his daughter's middle school graduation ceremony. So I think that's a worthwhile reason to miss the hangout. But as always, this is on tape, and you'll find it up on YouTube shortly. And Stephen has, I think, yeah, he's already posted the link to his Google Doc. You can check out the source code there and his remarks. And Ryan is going to be posting some blog posts about related to his particular session today. So that takes care of that. I want to remind you, first of all, thank you for joining us this month live. And if you'd like to do that again, we do this every month on the fourth Tuesday of each month at 11 a.m. our time, right? Oh, fourth Thursday.
By Tuesday, do you mean Thursday?
See, when my mouth gets started going, it just doesn't matter what comes out of it. It just keeps going. So yes, the fourth Thursday of each month is when you want to join us. And I actually have in mind another type of session we might do once a month as well, kind of coming out of Ryan's talk about debugging. So I'm going to kind of cultivate that in my mind and talk to Ryan about this, and we'll see. We might have another session coming up for you on a monthly basis. So stay tuned for that. But until next month, again, thank you, and have a wonderful, wonderful day or morning, as is the case in Australia. Have a good one, everybody.
Good to see everyone. Have a great week. Bye.
Thanks, guys.